Good evening, sir. Your live.
Uh, Merry Christmas to all, and welcome to the 19th Aligarh Society of History and Archaeology, that is ASHA and Ganga Jamni lecture on our shared past and its sources of information. As the year 2020, which brought us so much pain in the form of a world with pandemic, and as we celebrate the birth of Christ, we end our lecture series of this year by two lectures which celebrate our culture and depict our resilience. Christmas has been celebrated in India at least since the reign of Akbar. The nativity play originated in medieval Europe, but in North India it dates back to the time of Akbar the Great, who invited the Jesuit fathers to his court at Fatehpur Sikri and at Agra. A building was assigned to the Jesuits at Fatehpur Sikri, very near to the imperial palace, where they built their first church. Its remains have now been recovered through the excavations. A large number of miniatures and wall paintings also survive from the reign of both Akbar and Jahangir, which celebrate Christmas, Mother Mary, and depicts scenes like Nativity, etc. The Franciscan annals record that at the capital, the Mughal capital, the joy of the congregation radiated all over the city. The bazaars put on their festive appearance with colorful arches and banners, and flags of several countries fluttered in the cold December air. Bugles blared, a number of musical instruments, clarinets, trumpets, etc. were sounded. Crackers were fired, and church bells rang. That is what the annals report. Akbar gave permission to the Jesuits to build a magnificent church in the city of Agra as well, tower and all, and with bells so that so heavy that when one of them fell down during the reign of his son Jahangir, it could not be carried by an elephant alone to the city Kotwali. The bell broke on the occasion of the baptism of Jahangir's nephews, when the sacrism is said to have gone mad with joy and to have pulled and tugged at the rope of the bell until it fell down with a great crash. Luckily, no one was injured, and the sacrism did not lose his job. The celebrations on Christmas continued during the reign of Jahangir, who celebrated the festival and partook of the traditional dinner at the Agra fort. On Christmas morning, Akbar used to come to the church with his nobles to see the representation of the cave in which Christ was born and the mountain on which the good shepherds kept watch. Again, this is what the annals report. In the evening, the ladies of the harem and the younger princes visited the church at Lahore and presented, beeswax candles. Since then, Akbar came there every Christmas day and was conducted to the church at Agra like a bishop to the chiming of bells and singing of hymns. From 1632 onwards, this play, which used to take place, was discontinued because Shah Jahan, who fell out with Portuguese, demolished the church of Agra after the sacking of Hooghly, of the Hooghly port, and forbade public worship by the Christians. There were hundreds of Portuguese prisoners at Agra who had to be been brought all the way from Bengal. But in 1640, the relations between the emperor and the Portuguese began to improve, and they were again allowed to build a church at Agra. It still exists. Today, we will not about this Christmas celebration at the Mughal court. However, we will be discussing about another festival which was celebrated by all concerned. Today, we talk about a festival which was celebrated and is still celebrated, cutting across the religious fault lines. On Sunday, we will discuss how our cinema, especially the Bollywood, preserve and disseminate the memory of the Mughals. Our sources mention a number of festivals which were celebrated in India, both Hindu and Muslim. Of them, Basant was one of those which was celebrated by all, high and low, rich and poor, Hindus and Muslims. Today, we have a very popular historian amongst us, and she is none other than Rana Safavi, who studied history from Aligarh, migrated to the Gulf, but emigrated back to India to shine on the social firmament as a historian, writer, blogger, and a translator. She is a passionate believer in India's Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb, the syncretic culture, which she documents through her writings, podcasts, and videos. In 2011, she started the Twitter forum, the #Shire, which was responsible for popularizing Urdu online. It's a unique platform which is still going strong with over 20,000 members. Rana Safavi is my senior and has published 7 books so far on culture, history, and monuments of India. These are, for example, Tales from the Quran and Hadith, the Delhi Trilogy, Where Stones Speak, The Forgotten Cities of Delhi, and Shahjahanabad, The Living City of Old Delhi. She has translated both the editions of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's seminal a work on Delhi, which is known as Asarus Sanadid, the Dastan-e-Ghadar, which was compiled by Zahir Dehlavi, and 4 accounts of 19th and 20th century Delhi from Urdu to English. I find the Asarus Sanadid translated by her as one of her most important contributions. The text was translated partially even before. Her translation is more complete and additionally a collation of the 2 editions which Sir Syed had left behind. Rana Safavi also writes newspaper columns. She used to write about our monuments for papers like Hindu. She now is writing columns for Indian Express. She also writes for such portals as Dailyo and Scroll.in. Today, she will talk on When Mustards Bloom, celebrating a shade festival in the capital city of the Mughals. Over to you, Rana.
Thank you so much, Professor Rizavi, for this lovely introduction and giving me the opportunity for this meeting everybody on this wonderful and very, very vibrant platform. Before I start, I'd just like to take a minute to pay tribute to somebody who left us today, Professor Shamsur Rahman Farooqi Saab. He was an exponent of Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb apart from his many, many literary achievements, the foremost scholar of Urdu, very well grounded in the classical traditions of Urdu, Farsi, and English, and somebody who gave me a lot of support You mentioned Asaru Sanadid. I remember the number of WhatsApp messages I would exchange with him when I would get stuck, especially in the alqab of the notable persons of Delhi. I would send it to him. He would call back immediately and say, iska matlab ye hai, read it out to me. He is somebody who was so extremely generous with his knowledge, with his time, with his support. Somebody who is going to be missed by everybody and especially by me. अल्लाह उनको की मगफरत करे और आला मकाम जन्नत में हासिल करे इंशाल्लाह आमीन और उनके सब चाहने वालों को सब्र अता करे. And to come back to today's lecture, Shagufta, can you please share the screen? As Professor Rizavi mentioned, this is on When Mustards Bloom, a shared festival in the Mughal capital city of Delhi. This is a festival that I have been visiting for the past few years. Since 2013 is when I went there the first time to the Dargah for this festival, and after that I have gone every year. This year, most probably, I will miss it because of the pandemic. But it is such a vibrant festival, and it is a reminder of our shared traditions, of a shared culture, and the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb that we have lived and we want to live and keep living. Can you show the next one, please? Now, Professor Rizavi has already talked about Christmas and the Mughal participation in it. Here, I'd like to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and show you this beautiful miniature, which is in the National Museum of Delhi, and show you something which Shagufta actually pointed out. That is that the setting for this seems to be Diwane Khas in the Tilai Mubarak or Red Fort. You can see identical inlay petadura in this column, which you can see in this. This is the Diwane Khas, and these columns, which I have photographed, you can see the inlay work. It's very similar. So and this was made during the reign of Muhammad Shah Basha and 18th century, and the importance of festivals of celebrating each and every festival can be seen from the fact that the nativity scene is set inside the Diwane Khas, which was the hall of private audience. Can we go to the next one? Now, how did this legend of Basant start? Interestingly, I didn't find any reference to it in Fawaid al-Fawad, which has been translated by Bruce Lawrence as Models of the Heart. But if you go to the Dargah or if you go to any of the Chishti Dargahs, you will find that the Chishtis actually the color that they associate with is also this Basanti color. The color of the dupatta that I am wearing. In fact, during any Chishti celebration, you'll find that they are wearing safas or turbans or scarves of this particular color. Now, according to legend, and this legend I was told by the people, the Pirzadas in the Dargah, as well as it's mentioned in many books, including the book In the Bazaars of Love, which is a translation of the verses of Hazrat Amir Khusro by Professor Sunil Sharma. And in that also he says according to legend. So we'll go according to legend because oral history is a very strong tradition in our country. And if it results in something so beautiful, so let us go with the oral history. Now, how it started was that it is said that one day that Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, known as Sultanji because of his title Sultanul Mashayikh, was very upset and grieving because his nephew, his sister's son, Taqiyuddin Nuh, had passed away. And Hazrat Nizamuddin himself was not married, and for him, his sister's son was a very important part of his family. And he was grieving, he had stopped coming for the summer mehfils. Around that time, as you know, that as soon as the cold and the chill of winter finishes and we celebrate the festival of Basant Panchami or spring. Sitting in this khanka, which I have shown you here, this is at the back of Humayun's tomb. And in fact, Humayun's tomb was built between the khanka and the dargah. So sitting in this khanka, in this place where the river Yamuna flowed just in front of it, Hazrat Amir Khusro saw some women dressed up in yellow carrying sprigs of mustard flower going to this Kalkaji Mandir. Now this is a lithograph from Asaru Sanadid. sketched by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and then of course drawn by Ghulam Ali Khan and Faiz Ali Khan. So he saw these people and he asked them, he saw they were very joyous, they were singing, he asked them, what are you doing? And they said, we are going to visit our Devi and our God, and we are carrying these mustard flowers. And he said to have asked them, will your gods be happy if they see this? And he said yes. So immediately he took off his turban, which happened to be yellow, tied it up, wore a yellow scarf, and went in front of Sultanji, Hazrat Mehboob Elahi, Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, and started singing songs of Sakal Ban Phool Rahi Sarson. And that song brought a smile on Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia's face. And after that, his mourning was, of course, set aside. And since then, they say that this festival has been celebrated. Can we have the next one, please? Now, as I said, I have found no mention of this in Morals of the Heart of Awaid al-Fuwad, which is a conversation of, which is a record of his conversations and his routine and his mehfils by one of his shagirds, Amir Hassan Shirdi. But the first time that we find documented, of course, there may have been another this thing, but what I have found, the documented evidence of this was in Muraqqai Delhi, which is written by Dargah Quli Khan during the reign of Muhammad Shah. And he had, Dargah Quli Khan had joined the service of Nawab Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah, with whom he came to Delhi in 1738, and he stayed here till 1741, and in fact he was a witness to the sack of Delhi by Nadir Shah. And Dargah Quli Khan kept a record of his visit known as Risala-be-Salar Jung, the treatise of Salar Jung. And in 1926, the sections concerning Delhi were extracted and published as Muraqqai Delhi or Album of Delhi. Since then, Dargah Quli Khan's journal has been known by this title. Can we have the next one, please? Now, it's not surprising that since it started, that Dargah Quli Khan has come in the reign of Muhammad Shah, because Muhammad Shah wrote verses in Braj Bhasha. His takhallus was Aftam, and he wrote many songs dedicated to Basant. As we can see, this is Basant wasn't the only festival that they celebrated. They also celebrated Holi. This is a very famous miniature of Muhammad Shah Basha in front of Imtiaz Mahal, which is the women's section in the Haram or the Mahal Sara in the Red Fort. And he's celebrating Holi here with the ladies. And Nadirat-e Shahi, which is a compilation of his Farsi, Avdi and Urdu verse, which was compiled on his orders in the 18th century, I'm forgetting the exact date, that has these verses in it. I was pointed to this by Professor David Lunn, who is a professor in SWAS. I had asked him about it because he had been researching Muhammad Shah's verses. So he pointed it to me. It is available, this book is available on Rekhta. I'll just read out what he writes. प्यारे बिना सकी कह करूं ये नीकी बहार बसंत जो आई, फूली गुलाब की शीतल बास बयार मिली चहु ओर को घाई, बौरी भई हूं बोल न जानू भूल गई मन की चतुराई, बैठ के अंबा के डारन पे उस बैरन कोयल ने कूक मचाई. Now this is songs of Virah, because Basant ho ya monsoons ho, in Indian tradition we have a lot of songs of longing by the women who have been left behind when the men go out to work. Now this particular verse, which is the second one, Manjan kar khanjan, anjan dije sajni, sab mile कीजे सिंहार, शीश सुधर गुड़वा लीजे गाय पसंद, दीजे मुबारक शाह आलम के दरबार. Sorry, it's Shah Alam, not Muhammad Shah. These are the verses of Shah Alam. This second verse, you will find that it is very similar to the song that is very popular, Aaj Basant Manalo Suhagan. The words of this are reflected from that. So these are the verses. This is the compilation or the divan of Shah Alam. Can we have the second one? Now, Dargah Quli Khan describes how Basant is being celebrated in the city of Delhi, the capital of the Mughals, in 1738-39, before the sack of Delhi by Nadir Shah. Most probably, he is talking of early 1739, which would have been because Basant falls normally in January or February. Now, the first stop in those days, it was celebrated for 7 days, and it was celebrated across the dargahs of Delhi. The procession started from Qadam Sharif, which is a dargah that was is said to have been built by Firoz Shah Tughlaq, and over here there is a Qadam Rasul. Again, you would be knowing, many of you, that imprints of the foot of the Prophet, peace be upon him, is a very popular relic and found in many dargahs all over India. And most of them are called Qadam Sharif, Qadam Rasul, or by a similar name having the word Qadam in it. Now, this is known as Qadam Sharif, and it is said that the holy foot of the imprint of the Prophet is said to have been brought by Makhdum Jahania Jahan Gasht in Firoz Shah's reign, and he presented it to the Basha. The Sultan's son, Fath Khan, also wanted it, and it was decided at that point of time. I don't think the Sultan thought that the son would die in his reign, and he said, whoever dies first. Unfortunately, Fath Khan died, and it is said that it was buried in his grave. Today, of course, this imprint has been taken away, and it is kept in the Khadim's house. It is not in part of the grave. Only when I went, I requested them, so then they brought and showed it to me. Can we have the next one, please? Now, from there, they went to Mehroli, all the way from Paharganj to Mehroli, to the shrine of Qutbul Laqtab, or Hazrat Qutbuddin Bakhtiar Kaki. In those days, this was an open shrine, open grave with no building on it. This building that we see now has been built in 1941 by one of the devotees, and the festivities continued here. And the festivities were singing, dancing, and merrymaking. Can we have the next one, please? Now, after that, they would go to the Dargah of Roshan Chiragh Delhi. Hazrat Roshan Chiragh Delhi is the Khalifa of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia. And this is in that area also is called Chiragh Delhi. It's in the center of Delhi today. After that, they would come to the Dargah of Sultan al-Mashayikh or Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, where this is the only place where the festival is celebrated even today. The other dargahs haven't continued it. Day 4, they would go to Dargah Rasul Numa. Now, the Rasul Numas were a sect of, they were called Rasul Shahis, and their head was Hassan Rasul Numa. And it is said that he used to have visitations of the Prophet in his dreams, and he could make anybody have the same visitations in the dream as and when he wanted by reading certain duas. This is the Rasul Shahid were very important in the 18th and 19th century. Now, this is the lithograph from Sir Syed Ahmad's book, Asarus Nandid, and this is the photograph that I had taken. Today, it's badly crowded, encroached upon, and Hakim Ajmal Khan is also buried just near that. Now, day 5, they would go to the Dargah of Hazrat Shah Turkoman. A very interesting thing is that today, just outside Turkoman Darwaza, there is a small shrine which is said to be the grave of Saint Turkoman, Shah Turkoman, Bayabani. But it is not right. The actual grave is inside the Mohalla, which is called Mohalla Qabristan, and it is an open grave. It is not enclosed inside a room as the one outside. The one outside is listed as in Maulvi Zafar Hassan's book, Monuments of Delhi, as well as in Bashiruddin Ahmad Saab's book, Waqiyat-e Darul-Hukumat-e Delhi, as the grave of some unknown person. But today it's become a proper shrine, and most people go there. Even I had initially gone there. Then day 6 would be celebrated in the Havelis of nobles, and day 7 at the grave of Azizi in Ehdipura. Now, Ehdipura was the place where the soldiers lived. I haven't been able to as yet track down who Azizi was, but hopefully someday I will. Maybe she was a courtesan, because they played a major role in this. In fact, in all festivals. Even in the Phool Walon Ki Sair, when the floats would go, as we call the floats today in the takhts on which people would, the first would go the Naubat walas, and they would be playing the nafiris and the Naubats, and the second takht would be of the Dera Wali Tawaifs. So they played a major role in all festivities, and probably this is a grave of some important courtesan of that age. Now, Delhi wasn't the only place. This is a float of a boat from Lucknow in the Husainabad Gallery of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah celebrating Basant on the banks of Delhi. As a child growing up in Lucknow, I remember that on in Shaban, on 15 Shaban, early morning we would go and there would be similar bajras decorated with flowers, and we would go there and we would, put arizas into the river, which are petitions to the 12th Imam of the that we believe in, and something very similar like this. It was there till the 70s, and I remember going there with my grandmother. Now to come back to the celebration of Basant in today's day. Sufi courtyards or Sufi dargahs, thresholds were very, very inclusive. They are still very inclusive today. And the reason for that is that they had open doors, they believed in service to mankind, and as a very popular quote, very famous quote, and this is from Morals of the Heart uh, of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia. It says, devotion to God is of two kinds, lazmi, intransitive, and mutaddi, transitive. In lazmi devotion, the benefit which accrues is confined to the devotee alone. This type of devotion includes prayers, fasting, pilgrimage to Mecca, that is Hajj, recitation of religious formulae, wazifa, etc., turning over the beads of the rosary. The mutaddi devotion, on the contrary, brings advantage and comfort to others. It is performed by spending money on others, showing affection to people, and by other means through which a man strives to help his fellow human beings. The reward of mutaddi devotion is endless and limitless. And as Hazrat Ali said, the best devotion is that which you don't show. So, whatever we are doing, the ritual worship that we are doing for ourselves, it's best not to make a show of that. And even when we do any other kind of worship and do service, it's best to do it quietly. And I think that is what was being done in the khankas of old and why people started flocking here. And today it has become a repository of a shared culture. Now, this is from 2013, the first year I went there. The dargah starts from this wall. Now, this wall, Professor Rizavi would be knowing this very well. This is the wall of the Tablighi Jamaat there, Markaz. And next to it is the Lal Mahal, which was built during the reign of Balban. So, probably there was some medieval building here from where the procession would have started. Today, because this is just the wall left, so the procession starts by touching the mustard flowers to this wall, and then after that these small children and older ones, of course, I've seen these children literally growing into and now becoming kawals themselves, so they carry these small pots of mustard flowers. Now, the procession then weaves around the Hazrat Nizamuddin Basti and comes to the mazar of Khwaja Taqiyuddin Nu, who is the nephew of Hazrat Amir Khusro, sorry, of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia. And they would come here and then they stand here, and every station they stand and sing. Can you play the music, Shagufta, please? No, in the over here. Is it playing? We can't hear it. It may be on mute. Okay, I will play from here. बन फूल रहे सरसों अंगना मोरे
ना मोरे ते सुपूटे कोयल कूकत डार डार और गोरी करत श्रृंगार मालनिया घर वाले आई हर सो सकल बन फूल रही सरसों तरह तरह के फूल लगाए तरह तरह के फूल लगाए पीवरवा हाथन में लाए पीवरवा हाथन में लाए निजामुद्दीन के दरवाजे पर ख्वाजा निजामुद्दीन के दरवाजे पर आवन कह गए आशिक रंग और बीत गए बरसों सकल बन फूल रही सरसों सकल बन फूल रही सरसों
Now, this Purbi lyrics are sung to the tune of Rag Bahar, and this is something that is synonymous with Basant celebrations, and it will be sung everywhere. And it's sung by everybody in the dargah. Now, Qawwali is a very important part of the Chishti silsila, especially Sama Qawwalis, where because it's a mode of reaching ecstasy and going into a hal, which is a trance, where you are supposed to be the closest to God. Can you play this, Shagufta? Because this is a video. You increase the sound of your laptop.
Because I'm on mute, I'll have to do it now this way.
Huh. Check the sound on your laptop because we can't hear it.
Can you hear it?
No, we can't hear anything.
And again, now let me check. I have it all on my phone, so I can play it from here probably. Let me see.
Let's try it that way because
So Qawwali is also a tradition which is said to have been started with Hazrat Amir Khusro, and the word Qawwali comes from call, which is Hazrat Rasul Huda's call of Man Kunto Maula Fahaza Aliun Maula, which was set to music, that is as per tradition, that it was set to music by Hazrat Amir Khusro, and after that he trained some 9 children from whom starts the Qawwal Bacha tradition, of which one very unfortunately passed away recently, Ustad Iqbal Ahmed, and the other part of it is in Pakistan. One part of the Qawwal Bacha families, Farid Ayaz. So that call has been, from that call the word Qawwali comes. Now the chadar is taken, then after going through the alleys of the Hazrat Nizamuddin Basti, the chadar or the yellow chadar then enters into the dargah, and it is ceremoniously offered by everybody onto the shrine. And this is the only day in which Qawwali is also sung inside the shrine. Normally, no Qawwali is sung in the shrine. It's only sung in the courtyard. Now this is the dargah of Hazrat Amir Khusro, who is said to be from where this tradition started, and the writer of all these qawwalis that we have been hearing today, the qawwalis and the geets. Again, just a second, because just see if you can try that, otherwise I'll play it from here. नहीं, आज बसंत मना ले सुहागन I have only on my laptop, which I put on this. Check the volume on your laptop.
I don't know. I think I've tried. Let's try this one last time, if it works. Are you able to hear it?
No.
Okay, so then it seems that I can't play it on my end.
Okay, no worries. So I've written it down here. These are the lyrics. Aaj basant manale suhagan. Aaj basant manale. And it is so similar to the verse of Shah Alam. अंजन मंजन कर पिया लंबे नहर लगाए तू क्या सोवे नींद मासी सो जागे तेरे भाग सुहागन आज बसंत मना ले. Now this is again sung there, and as you would know, in the Sufi tradition, God or the divine is the beloved, and the person seeking it is the lover. And the visal that they talk about is the union when after death, the concepts of fana and baqa. So most of the songs that are sung here, or the qawwalis, they all have that theme. It may seem as if you are talking about earthly beloved, but the beloved is always the divine. Now this I can have on my. तू तो साहिब महबूबे इलाही मोहे रंग दे 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 मोहे रंग दे मोहे रंग दे रंग दे मोहे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे पिया की पगरिया पिया की पगरिया हमारी चुनरिया दोनों बसंती रंग दे दोनों बसंती रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे रंग दे
रंग दे रंग दे हे रंग दे.
So this is कि मोहब्बत के रंग में रंग जाएं सब लोग. And when you go there, the kind of vibes you get there, the meeting of souls actually, and the interaction between people, the love and affection about amongst each other, and people who come here of every religion, faith, class, sect, etc. And वहां जाके सच में ही लगता है कि महबूब इलाही के रंग में रंग गए हैं और एक मोहब्बत का रंग चढ़ जाता है हम सब पर. So actually I'm more used to Zoom, so I haven't been able to control the screen here. So as you can see, it's just a color, everywhere there's the yellow color. People are throwing flowers. I have a complete wardrobe of yellow because it comes in winter. So I have yellow shawl, yellow sweater, everything which I wear and go there because everybody is dressed in yellow. And there'll also be those who don't have, they distribute scarves there for people. Now, this is not something that, I have been attending Basant over here in Hazrat Nizamuddin Dargah since 2013. But this is not my introduction to Basant. When I was studying in Women's College in AMU, I'm talking of 1974, 75, 76, there would be celebrations of Basant inside the women's hostel. And there would be swings put up. We would all wear yellow clothes, just as these two girls are wearing. And there would be, we would sing songs. A very popular song used to be Hana Ke. Later on, I realized it's a kajri, but we would sing that for some reason on Basant, is that Kaise Khelan Jaiyo Sawan Ma Kajariya. And we would have yellow, either tahiri or kadhi chawal for lunch in the hostels, which would be followed by the yellow papdi, special sweet of Aligarh, which I just crave for these days. And we would have such fun. And this is a tradition. I don't know whether it is continued now or not, but this was the tradition at my time where we celebrated every festival inside the hostel. And I remember, like today's Christmas, we would be celebrating Christmas. We would celebrate Holi, Diwali, Eid, Bakrid. During Muharram, we would have majlises inside the hostel, inside the women's college actually, near the staircase. We would stand on the staircase and somebody would stand in the middle and there would be nohas and matam. And this is the kind of shared culture, the shared celebrations that we lived with, and that the traditions that I grew up in with. And this is the syncretic culture, and as the board here says, the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb. And Ganga Jamni doesn't mean that you overpower one or become just a single culture. It's a composite culture where all the just as Ganga and the Jamna, they flow separately, but they do have a sangam. So you find your shared traditions and you keep your individuality. So any
Thank
questions?
you so much, Rana Appa, for this. And Professor Rizavi may have some questions, and I'll look for the questions here.
Thank you for this, your explanation of one cultural tradition, which, as you rightly pointed out, starts from the, Sultanate period and still continues in certain areas. Say, for example, as you ended, you pointed out that till date, places like Aligarh do keep on celebrating such common festivals. There are a number of things which I would like to point out. One is that, painting or miniatures is a very good source for the understanding of the cultural aspects. You also, during the course of this lecture of yours, did show a number of miniatures and paintings. You know, for example, one of the first painting which you showed, you said that possibly the setting is within the court at the Delhi Qila. Might be, might not be. I would just like to point out that any artist who would be depicting something would be depicting anything which he has actually seen himself. The artist who was making that drawing probably was a visitor to the court and must have seen the type of depictions on the surfaces of the Diwan-e-Aam, Diwan-e-Khas. And that is why he thought, in his perception, the location of such incident should also be such a palace. Right? So it is, I'm not sure whether these type of celebrations were actually held within the palace itself or not. Probably they were, but their depiction by the artist only shows his own, feeling where he should be placing such events which for him are important. I agree with you that naturally, because this was a tradition which was being followed, as in one of your earlier lectures also I pointed out that most of these traditions have been mentioned in tidbits in earlier sources also. Dargah Quli Khan, after all, is a very detailed description of the cultural life. It is being written, as you pointed out during the course of your lecture, by a person who was a visitor to Delhi. Everything for him was something new. So when you visit, you become a foreigner, a visitor to a place, you observe everything and record it. Right. So the Dargah Quli Khan is recording everything, which, as you rightly pointed out, was being held at Delhi even prior to the recordings by Dargah Quli Khan himself. Although, as again you rightly pointed out, that the details in the sources are missing. We have only, as I said, tidbits of information. Yet another thing which I would like to add is that sometimes we feel that legends have no meaning. As you started your lecture by pointing out that भाई इसमें बहुत सी चीजें लिखी भी नहीं है. There is a legend that this used to happen. And a serious historian, say a historian of economic history, would then generally jump to the idea that because it's a legend, we should reject it. For a cultural historian, legend is extremely important. It is important in the sense that a legend is actually a mirror to the culture and ethos of the period during which that particular legend is being minted and circulated. जब हम ये सोचेंगे कि ये बात मानी जा सकती है या हमारी थिंकिंग ऐसी होगी कि ऐसा रहा होगा और लोग उसको रिसीव कर लेंगे, तभी वो पर्टिकुलर थॉट बनाई जाएगी. राइट. तो अब इससे पहले होता था कि नहीं होता था, whether this was happening before or not happening before, whether during the Sultanate period the legend says that this was happening, Mahbub Ilahi was doing that, we are not sure whether he was doing it or not, but at least during the period when such legends were prepared, at least during that period, such a culture was prevailing. Now, as you rightly pointed out, that in the Malfuzat of these saints, we hardly get any reference. Possibly it was not there. But from that period, from 13th, 14th centuries onwards, as both the communities kept on interacting with each other. So by the time we reach the 17th century or late 17th century, 18th century, and 19th century, probably these things became so established that everybody started believing that this was something which was happening. So legend has its own importance, and at least from the legend which you presented to us today, it is very, very apparent that Delhi of 18th century was celebrating those things which you were talking about. Now, there are a number of other things which one can discuss in this regard. One thing before I take up, I can see that there is a question on the screen, but before we take up the question which Zainab is asking, I would also like to point out yet another thing, and that is that this, festival of Basant is not only confined to the Sufi Khanqahs and at Delhi. We know it well that Basant is one of the festivals which became crucially important as far as the Sikh tradition is concerned. And we know very well that, at least 18th century onwards, the Sikh community had a sizable presence in the region of Delhi, and by 19th century and by 21st century, we know that the area being very close to Punjab, and naturally Haryana is what else but Punjab, we do have the Sikh traditions also influencing. I wish that in some future discourse of yours, when you talk about festivals like Basant, you not only invoke the Sufi tradition, because Nanak Panthis are also part of Sufism. And we know that there are a number of gurdwaras within the precincts of Delhi itself. And possibly, it would be good if you could compare the traditions as Basant is being celebrated, say at Amritsar in the Golden Temple, and the Basant, the description which we get as far as the text like Dargah Kholi Khan is concerned. So that is one of the aspects which I think also tells us about the development of a common culture. The same festival is being celebrated by the non-Muslims in their spaces. The Sikhs celebrating it at a large scale. The Sufi Dargahs celebrating it at another level. Today you told us about the Sufi culture, and hopefully one more time you would be discussing this culture as it developed under the Nanak Panthi community. But now I would request Shagufta to put up that question by Zainab. If it is visible, then we may have that question. Thanks for a vibrant presentation, Rana ma'am. My question is there participation from other religious communities when we talk of the Basant celebration at the Khanqahs, apart from the lay people who are part of the spectators? Or is it just the Sufis of the Khanqahs who organize the event?
Zainab, thank you. It's organized, of course, by the Sufis of the Dargah, but the participation is by everybody. I have once I had gone there, I met a Sahil Maharaj there. He was a priest from one of the temples. He had come with a chadar and a basket of flowers. So people from every tradition, as I said, the Sufis, the Sufi courtyard, the Sufi Dargah, it's open for all. People of all sects, class, religion, faith, everybody comes there. And वहाँ के ऊपर मजहब तो किसी से पूछा ही नहीं जाता है. So you are all one there. In fact, when you go there, everybody is wearing yellow. You can't recognize who is from which religion or who is what class. सब एक होते हैं वहाँ पे. And that is, I think, the beauty of the Dargah. But as far as organized participation is concerned, that happens in the Phulwalon Ki Sair today, where people from various states send their pankhas and they send cultural troops. But in the dargah, people come from far and wide. I've seen people from various dargahs and temples, and as Professor Rizavi just said, the Sikh community. So they are there, they distribute langar, and the tradition which is actually in which everybody participates is in the langar, where everybody will come and distribute langar, and they will, all of them will, from every faith. I've seen people from all kinds of communities and religions come there and distribute langar.
You know, there is one question by Rupa Abdi, and after that I will ask my question. Are you aware of any Basant song which uses the symbology of Rangreez for the divine beloved?
Not particularly for Basant, but that song Aaj Rang Hai, Aaj Rang Hai Ri More Khwaja Ka, that is also said to be associated with Basant only, and it is sung in Basant, and that uses the metaphor of a Rangreez only. Mohe apne hi rang mein rang de. So that is again a metaphor of the divine coloring your soul with love, his love.
Again, I mean, I would like to draw a parallel with the Sikh tradition. God in the Sikh tradition sometimes is also known as Rangreez. And here, I mean, रंग दे वाला जो आप जो बोल रही हैं, among the Sufis, it is there. The whole concept of Khanqah, where you have a langar, where you have this dress which you and me today are wearing. I mean, even most of the Sardars there would be having this saffron turban on their heads. So there are a number of similarities, and I wish that somebody would draw, a parallel between these two traditions. I would be very much interested to know from where these traditions were drawn.
The langar traditions in the Gurudwaras are from Baba Farid's Khanka. A lot of, because Guru Nanak Dev Ji was very influenced by Baba Farid.
There is a question by Ashok Mathur. Shagufta, can we have it here?
Trance.
About the trance. Is it invoked by the Qawwals and is sort of handled during its period?
See, trance is hal, and the purpose of the Qawwali itself is to induce the hal. And that is what a Sama Mehfil is all about. And Sama Mehfils predate, the Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya also, because Sama Mehfils were always held. In fact, Hazrat Qutubuddin Bakhtiar Kaki said to have left this world in a trance, in a state of trance. He went into a trance when he was listening to a verse by the famous Persian poet Hazrat Jami, and he went into a trance, and he then on the fourth day he left this world. So trance is induced. It's a kind of I have seen once, I saw somebody go into a trance. Now, how genuine it was, I don't know, but I saw this young man at the Dargah of Hazrat Inayat Shah. I think this was 2014 or so, when they used to have Qawwalis there on Friday evenings. And I saw this young man suddenly stand up and start dancing. And those whirling dervishes that is associated with Maulana Rumi, again, that was also a way of going into a state of hal. And that hal is then you're you're supposed to be the closest to God at that point of time, where only you and God exist, and then you become one with the divine. Where as that famous saying of Mansur al-Hallaj an al-Haq, where you feel that you have merged. आपका बिल्कुल मतलब एक विशाल हो गया है, union हो गया. So I saw this young man go into a trance, and that is the reason. And in a Qawwali, अगर आपको सुनिएगा मन कुंतो मौला, जो composition है हज़रत अमीर खुसरो का, उसमें there are a lot of mystical chants. Those mystical chants are only to invoke, because कॉल तो सिर्फ 2 ही लाइन का है, मन कुंतो मौला फहादन अलीउन मौला. उसके बाद जितने वो chants हैं, दरा दरा दिन सब करके जो है वो, मतलब I don't know them by heart. I've written about them. तो वो chants जो है वो mystical chants है, which the Qawwal will keep on invoking till he can get some kind of response from you. And in a Qawwali, the Qawwal will be sitting and seeing your reaction, and he will keep repeating the verse or the line or even that particular word which he sees that some people in front of them are responding to. And then that may be a trigger to get the person in front into a hal or a trance where he is lost to the world. I have also seen Gurudas Man once do this. Again, this would be in the 1990s. He was very young. He had come to Pune and he was performing Mankunto Mola. And he himself went into a trance where at the end he was just saying Yali, Yali, and singing and whirling. So that is the purpose. The Sama Mehfil and the Qawwali, the purpose itself is hal.
The tradition, as you said, of hal and sama are quite old. In fact, there are traditions which point out that it is even before the Sufis came to India, these traditions were continuing and they were very much present there. One of the first references which we get to Sama is from the time of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia, when he was censored for holding the Sama celebrations. And the Sultan of the time, I'm forgetting his name, please forgive me if I take the name wrong.
Ghiyasuddin Khilji.
Yeah, I think it was Ghiyasuddin.
Ghiyasuddin.
Yeah, so meeting was held and which was known as Mahzar. Under Akbar, Mahzar had a different connotation, different sense. But during the Sultanate period, Mahzar was actually almost the same thing as under Akbar the Ibadat Khana meetings were, where a place where religious congregations would take place and they would discuss certain issues. So in this particular Mahzar, the ulama of that period assembled and called this meeting. The Sultan was made the judge, and an accusation was brought against Nizamuddin Aulia that he is practicing something which is forbidden in Islam. And in fact, what he is doing is that he is practicing ijtihad by, introducing a tradition which is not known to Islam. And then Nizamuddin, in fact, then went on to defend his position, citing the sources, citing the ahadith, citing the Islamic literature for that, to show that no, sama or music is something which is allowed in Islam. This is the first recorded, historical evidence that at least during the early Sultanate period, during the period of Nizamuddin Aulia, the sama was taking place. We know that even sama was being practiced by Hazrat Moinuddin Chishti as well, but that is all mostly hearsay. But here we do get a record of a clash on this particular issue between the theologians and the Sufis. In fact, this clash did not end at this particular moment of time. We know that even because you also brought your lecture from Sultanate down to Aligarh. So I would also say that this sort of a measure which took place under Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq was not only confined to the Sultanate period, but this debate continues till date, in which a large number of Muslims accuse those Muslims who practice Qawwali and Sama as to be non-Muslims, and they accuse them that they are following a Hindu tradition. Although, as I tried to point out, this was a tradition which was very much prevalent among the mystics, even prior to their coming to Islam. And one of the facts is that if you go to Maulana Rumi or any of those Central Asian, Sufis. Now, for today's generation, it is very easy to understand because from the moment that El Togrul serial is being shown on the networks, now you can, everyone can have a look at what type of Islam. In fact, every one of you know that El Togrul serial is a part of an attempt by the Ottoman president to stranglehold the Islamic position of his. But even there, what is being depicted is that the Islam is of a different variety altogether, with much influence of mysticism over it. Rana Appa, thanks a lot for today's discussion. There is a lot to say. There are many aspects which unfortunately could not be covered in such a topic. Naturally, much more research is needed. It is very unfortunate that as far as the cultural history of India is concerned, especially cultural history of medieval India, that has generally been a neglected field. Mostly, the type of researches which are now being done on culture are still in a very nascent stage. And I hope, whatever I have read of the sources, I can assure you, I can't give you examples verbatim here, but I can assure you that if someone takes up these topics for research, there is enough material for anyone to write a good thesis on the developing Indian common culture, especially so as far as 18th century is concerned. I'll just point out that there is a book which had been published from Aligarh itself. It's a very general book, not very critical in its approach, but still has much material. At least the author has cited a large number of sources. That is a book by Professor Muhammad Umar that has many aspects of culture which he has reproduced, some of them without thinking, but still I would recommend that if anybody is interested in reading about culture, especially such a theme as was discussed today, the book of Muhammad Umar can be a starting point. Thank you once again, Rana Appa, for
Thank you.
the lecture. I hope that people would be, although they are in a very festive mood, it being Christmas today, and by day after tomorrow, I don't think that the Christmas spirit would go off. It will continue. But remember that day after tomorrow, we have an excellent lecture which is lined up. That is by Dr. Professor Catherine Schofield, who was earlier known, and she will be speaking on Mughals, music, and the films. In fact, the whole idea is how the Mughals have been portrayed as far as the Bollywood is concerned, basically, and how today we are perceiving the Mughals culturally. So with these, I thank every one of you who joined today, in spite of the fact that today is a Christmas. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. And have a nice evening and a happy new year. And hope the new year is much better.
Thank you.
So there's a question. What is the book by Muhammad Umar called?
Well, the book by Muhammad Umar is I think it is known as the Cultural History of India. You can Google it. It's available on the Amazon. I'm forgetting the title. In fact, Muhammad Umar has two books. One of them is comparatively better. I'm sorry I'm using these terms because it has, it's a very well vetted book. He has in fact written 2 books on the culture. They are basically on the culture of the 18th century. I'm not remembering, but there is another book. Let me point out the book by Professor Athar Abbas Rizvi. The works of Athar Abbas Rizvi, which are on 18th century. Their titles are such that you would think that they are about Sufism, but they contain, for example, Shah Abdul Aziz Dehlavi, Shah Waliullah Dehlavi. But there is much information which you have on the cultural aspects under the Mughals, especially from late 17th to 18th century. So even Athar Abbas Rizvi is a good example from where one can get material on the culture. Urban culture in North India during 18th century, Muhammad Umar. That is the name of the book.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Have a great festive weekend and see you all tomorrow and day after at 7. Thank you so much, Rana Appa.
You didn't tell us about tomorrow's program, Shagufta.
So we've already informed, but I will inform everyone just that tomorrow we have at 7 p.m. we have a talk on food by food historians Salma Hussain and Sohail Hashmi, and this will be about Mughal food. So you'll be surprised that modern day Punjabis eat more meat than Mughals actually did, and many more things that you will find out. And then, of course, on Sunday at 7, we have Mughals, Music and Films by Dr. Catherine Butler Schofield, and she'll be talking to us from London at 7 p.m. And so there's going to be Mughal-e-Azam, there's going to be all anarkalis of the world that you can talk about, and many more things that are evidence based, and we'll have a lot of fun, and this will be an end to our festive weekend.
Dear audience, when we started in October, और बड़े हम लोगों के सीरियस लेक्चर्स हो रहे थे, तो लेकिन आखिरी 3 जो हैं हम थोड़ा ऐसे इस टाइप के हमने ईयर एंड में रखा है कि जिसमें आप सीखने के साथ साथ एंजॉय भी कर लें. खास तौर से जैसे आज राना सफवी ने जो ऑडियोज इनके सुनाए या जो वीडियो दिखाए, सीरियस हिस्टोरियंस उसको मिस आउट कर जाते हैं उन चीजों को. I think we should remain connected with these things. इनको ट्रिवियल मत समझिए. एक्चुअल कल्चर, जो सीरियस बातें हम लोग इतने हफ्तों से महीनों से कर रहे हैं, they boil down to what Rana Safavi today told you about. Thank you.
I think there's a lot of power in the oral history narrative, and a lot of historians are now considering the importance of oral history records. So so long live your work, Rana Appa, and thank you so much for contributing to and making history so much more popular and talked about. So great, thank you so much, and we have the festivities tomorrow and day after at 7. See you all. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.